I was a big fan of the Fiddler tool from Eric. His
Yeah.
last name's escaping me. He's worked on Google Chrome and he's at Microsoft again, I think, or maybe he's back at Google. I can't remember, but it's an amazing tool. And I was on a Linux box at one point, and so I was like really sad that I couldn't use Fiddler. And then the Mono project came out, and then there was like some kind of support for Fiddler on a Linux machine, but it was kind of like use at your own risk, kind of. And that's kind of how that's how I kind of discovered Mono. And then I remember hearing about Xamarin, um, but I didn't realize Xamarin was its own company. I always thought that was somehow part of Microsoft, so I might have missed that part with the acquisition. But okay,
It's so cool that you know about all this because, yeah, there's so much history that now is a lot of it's the foundation, for things inside of .NET. So yeah, like you mentioned, Miguel de Casa was our, founder, CTO at Xamarin. Love
yeah,
Miguel, still get to chat with him, uh, to this day. But,
okay,
yeah, he created well, if you go way back, he got into hot water with folks at Microsoft because he led this
okay,
or was one of the leaders of this alt.NET revolution, which was essentially back in the day. Oh gosh, I'm gonna say the 90s, but this is
okay.
before
Oh, way
before my
back.
time
Wow.
at .NET. Uh,
Okay,
but yeah, back in the day, he was one of the leaders. I'll say co-conspirators of alt.net, where
okay.
essentially developers and community were kind of like you were saying, like annoyed that .net's not open source, that it makes it more difficult to find fix bugs and all that fun stuff. And so violated sign. I was a 90s kid too, man. So we're all in this boat together. But
Yeah, I'm okay, boomer.
but
Sorry, I had to say it. I had to say it.
uh, yeah, so they basically reverse engineered .NET and made a
Okay,
open source alternative, alt.net.
okay,
And Microsoft, of course, hated it because at the time, Ballmer's still in charge and open source. What do you say? Open source is a cancer or Linux is a cancer. I forget
yeah, yeah,
all the things that didn't age well that Ballmer did as the head of
yeah.
Microsoft. But they kind of got to this gentleman's agreement where it's like, okay, fine, like we're not losing money to you guys. It's just a fun project. Like the real developers will still use the real .NET, not alt.net. It's like enjoy your side project, guys. And yeah, part of that was where Mono came about. So Mono
Okay.
was the first .NET runtime that you could use to run .NET code on Linux.
Mhm.
And again, Miguel, that's Miguel's baby.
Yeah.
And essentially, yeah, when this mobile revolution came out, when iOS got announced and Android got announced, uh, Miguel kind of looked at it and said, "Well, those iOS and Android are just Linux.
Yeah.
iOS is just a flavor of Linux. Android's just a flavor of Linux. Like, so it's really not that much of a stretch to see like, could we extend Mono to also work with mobile?" And
Okay.
essentially, what he did was to basically take that iOS SDK that now has something like 300,000 APIs on it, and
Mhm.
then just wrap each API into C sharp, or so that we can consume it in C sharp. So if you're familiar with the concept of p invoking down into lower level languages from C sharp,
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
that's all Xamarin was doing. So basically,
Okay.
yeah, he just wraps every API so it p invokes natively into it, and then I, as a user, can just write my C sharp code. Everything's still type safe, everything still compiles, all the tools just work. But then I get this native iOS app running on my iPhone, and the iPhone
Yeah.
doesn't know the difference because it's all the same native APIs as if I had written it in Objective C or Swift using Xcode.
Yeah.
So, uh, so, um, so yeah, that's kind of how Xamarin was born. Was based
Okay.
going all the way back to like alt.net, and then he created Mono, and then Mono got extended to mobile, and
Okay.
now Mono still lives on. Because
Okay. I didn't realize that.
yeah, so one of the cool things with Mono is it was also all it had to be ahead of time compiled because
Yeah.
iOS doesn't allow you to write code, interpret code, do anything at runtime, because
Okay.
it's a security feature. They don't want you to essentially inject code into the app that then gets run when the user launches
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Because holy cow, is that a vector for attacks?
Yeah.
And so yeah, Mono had to be completely ahead of time compiled, and that ahead of time compilation is now just now, like with .NET 8 come to .NET. So like your console
Okay.
apps can be ahead of time compiled now. Your ASP.NET Core apps can be ahead of time compiled now. And Blazor still runs on the Mono runtime, just like .NET
Oh, I didn't
MAUI
know
on
that.
iOS still runs on the Mono runtime.
Okay.
Because yeah, Blazor is how they get down to the WASM level. So
Okay.
Mono is still just crazy heavily used, and yeah, it's funny to think back. It just back in the 90s, a couple guys were upset that .NET wasn't open source and created this
Yeah.
thing called alt.NET, and that led to Mono, and that led to Xamarin, and now we got tools like Blazor running on it, and all this
That,
concepts like tree shaking is new to .NET, AOT is new to .NET, but like we've had those for over a decade now in Mono.
okay. Okay. I didn't realize tree shaking was a thing in .NET because this is one thing like I remember it's like people would make fun of like they'd say like I'd say like console log hello world in like JavaScript. It's literally one line, right? Obviously there's your JavaScript runtime, but like you do the
Yep.
same thing with .NET, like a console app, and then all of a sudden it's imported I don't know how many namespaces and whatever,
Yep.
and
Like a 5 megabyte app now. Like,
yeah, and
what?
you got your static void main, and then you're just like print hello or whatever. But it so with the tree shaking that you're talking about, does it literally, if I were to build that same console app today, it would literally say like I literally only need like the system.println and whatever like minimal stuff I need, and that's it. And so you end up with smaller binaries in general, or
Pretty much, man. Yeah, there's
okay,
because in .NET we call them the system libraries or the base class libraries, and yeah,
yeah,
that's where you find like what's the definition of a string and date time and those real low level, well, low level for high level language concepts.
yeah, yeah,
And yeah, so yeah, again, like Mono's had it for years. We called it the linker in
okay,
Mono, which I thought was a terrible name because linking to me is linking two things together. But the linker in
yeah,
Mono was to link something out of your code. But once you get past that, it
yeah,
was great. Um,
okay.
and yeah, now this concept of tree shaking is again just like .NET 8